It's a real honor to be here tonight. We're living in interesting times, and I want to start with something that I don't think anybody else at the NRA has ever started with: a picture of a naked hippie. There's the naked hippie. That's going to actually play a role in the talk tonight. I'll come back to it in a minute. The first time I was with the NRA and I spoke in Louisville, Kentucky, they gave me this gun. And this was such an amazing honor for me, but it was also one of the most terrifying times of my life, because the night I got it, they did, right before they gave this to me, a retrospective of Charlton Heston, because he had just died. And so that's the Charlton Heston gun. And so they had this gigantic 25-foot image of Charlton Heston and this big retrospective with him holding a gun just like this, saying, "Out of my cold, dead hands." And then they froze that image behind me. And they said, "And this year we would like to give this award to Glenn Beck." And then Wayne said to me, "Go ahead, say something." And as I walked to the podium, I swear to you, all I could think of was, just don't say you didn't take it out of his cold, dead hands. Just don't say that. I have no idea what I said, but I didn't say that. I want to talk to you a little bit tonight, and honestly, I have so many things to say that I've made some notes, which I don't usually use, but it was important to me that I write it down. Otherwise, we ain't getting out of here until midnight, because I've got a lot on my mind. Charlton Heston's words were meant to wake us up, to wake people up. He needed to shock us into realizing the situation that we were in, who our opponent really was, an out-of-control, growing government under the then-president, Jimmy Carter. Today, we are in a different place than we were in 1976, and the problems are much, much worse. But just as it in 1976 wasn't really about Jimmy Carter, make no mistake, it isn't about this president either. It's not just the Democrats. It's the Republicans as well. The problems are everywhere. And the problems aren't just in Washington. They're in the media. They're in our churches, our educational systems. They are in our own homes. The problem is the progressive ideology that is antithetical to our constitutional republic. They want to fundamentally transform our country. And I have news for you. They've just about finished that project. We used to ask just a few years ago, how did this happen? How did we get here? If we were to tell the truth to ourselves, we can come up with an awful lot of answers. But the truth is, we have to accept much of the blame ourselves for allowing this to happen, because even our families now are imploding because we bought a series of lies. Our lies that we have been living, our constitutional rights, our way of life, the freedom of all mankind, make no mistake, is at stake. And because of this, I truly believe that our souls are at stake as well. I have prepared my remarks here over the last few weeks. I usually write things about 20 minutes on the back of a napkin before I speak. But I believe this is a very, very important time in our country. I wondered what your reaction would be with some of the things that I have to say to you tonight, as well as the reaction of the rest of the country if the media were at all competent and covered real issues. I'm going to take a different approach to what many will expect from me tonight. Parts of these things will be hard tonight, but I want to start here. I grew up in a small town in Mount Vernon, Washington. It was a small farming community. I also have lived in a high-rise in Midtown Manhattan. I have picked raspberries on my grandfather's farm. I have hunted pheasants by his side on that same farm. And I have been in the boardrooms of the global elite in Wall Street. I am fortunate enough to have seen a lot of things in my life that very few people see. But in the end, here is what I know. I am blessed to have grown up in America. I cherish my country and our traditions. I was raised the way I was raised, and I'm glad I was raised with those values. But I also know that we are a very unique people, and I respect the way others were raised as well. I understand that many people cannot understand me or people like me or what I believe, and I'm okay with that. I don't understand how people can continue to live with Michael Bloomberg in New York, but hey, to each his own. I can appreciate the difference. And until recently, I always thought that's the way we were. I thought we could understand, appreciate, and live with the differences. We tended to get along. We have a rough journey ahead. This weekend, I believe it is one of the most important moments in American history and the defining moment of the NRA. It is good and just that this convention happens here in Texas this year. Because Texas is more than just a state. It is a symbol, or should be, the world over. It is the home of the Alamo. The Alamo is where that phrase, "Well, I'm going to draw a line in the sand," that's where that came from. Except I don't believe that it was said quite that way. A line in the sand was not a challenge. It was a line that William Travis put in the ground. He said, "I'm standing here, and I know what that means. And I know we're probably not going to make it out of here, but I'm standing here because it's right. And I will draw a line in the sand." And he looked at his 179 men and said, "Without malice, if you can't stand here, that's okay." Out of 179 men, 178 crossed that line. No surprise, it was a Frenchman that said, "I can't do it." James Bowie was so sick, he had somebody drag him across that line. He had to be carried to stand on that line. Colonel Travis said, "To the one that remained, best be going then." Tonight, let us dedicate ourselves, find out which side of the line we stand on. And without any malice, just like they had no malice for him, if we can't agree, best be going then. If we are going to stand and fight, which this evening has been labeled, we must love those who choose a different path. But we also must know 4 things. That we have to know what we fight, who we fight, why we fight, and how we fight. The media would have you believe that we are just silly and greedy and misguided people that just think that their guns and their gun rights are more important than people's children. But what we actually believe is that these things are important because of our children. The real rub of our disagreements come from the progressive elite believing that they can actually make choices for us that are better than the choices we ourselves would make. Choices on what we eat, what we drive, what we believe is moral and immoral, how to raise our children, even if or how we worship God. They think we're wrong. And so, instead of saying, best be going, they feel they must regulate us until we comply. I will not comply. We believe that it is they who are in error. And we are once again ready to live as Americans always have, to agree to disagree, to appreciate our freedom, or as they would say, celebrate diversity. And then, as neighbors and friends, return to focus on those things that unite us, instead of dwelling on those things that divide us. But there are those people who believe in the philosophies of man. Whether it is Marx and Engels or Saul Alinsky's rules that will divide and conquer, we not only believe those ideas are wrong, we also believe those ideas are dangerous and evil. We stand against those. We stand against those who want us to close our hearts by absolving us of our own personal responsibilities and duties to each other. We respectfully stand against those who want to force us to accept some faithless bureaucracy and call that charity. Charity is not something a government forces someone to do. Charity is something that comes from our belief in God, and He compels us to do. There are Americans that truly believe that they know better than everyone else. They truly believe that they should be put in charge of making all of the choices because their choice will be better than our choice. We think they are arrogant and wrong. America has been calling out for anyone, somebody, will you take responsibility? Will someone take responsibility? The culture of pass the buck now in America is so prevalent that our bucks no longer have any value. Tonight, let us pledge to each other that that era of American shame ends here. We will take responsibility. We are begging for responsibility. It begins with us. Millions of Americans and NRA members, millions more who are at home and are not NRA members, and millions who are Republicans and Democrats or somewhere in between, that are willing to stand up and say, the buck stops here with me. I will not only take responsibility, but I will cry out in this wilderness for my God-given right to not only make my own choice, but face the consequences of those choices. This is our difference. I beg you to change the argument. I beg you to not talk about rights, but let us now start the conversation about responsibilities. It is a righteous cause. It is a righteous cause and must be cemented in the truths of the past. But because the world is dynamic, so incredibly dynamic, we must build on those truths. Patrick Henry once said, "Give me liberty or give me death." May I clarify and perhaps deepen that meaning for today. It is time we say, "Give me responsibility or give me death." For there is no real liberty, no real freedom, if one is not allowed to make his or her own choices and then reap the benefits or fully accept the responsibility of those choices. Give me responsibility or give me death. We fight against those who stand against what our founders called nature's law. Those who believe they are qualified to make the decisions for the collective. May I humbly remind them that God Himself does not make decisions for the collective. God sent His only Son to help individuals. God Himself saves the individual, thus saving the collective. While we have a responsibility to love and to cherish and to care and to feed one another, in the end, it is only by each of us taking up that responsibility that we all progress as individuals and people. We stand and fight against those who deny the Creator, deny His power, and then have the audacity to grant to themselves the collective power that even God Himself denies. Please hear me clearly. This is not about presidents or parties. We wrestle against those powers and principalities, against the rulers of this darkness in this world. We stand against spiritual wickedness in high places, and we will fight them with the eternal truths that man once felt were so obvious that he declared them self-evident. Each of us were born in this country at this time for a reason. Each of us have a responsibility. Each of us have a job to do. Each of us will play an instrument in God's orchestra, and it will ensure that the flame of man's liberty is not snuffed out, but it will be the people in this room and those anywhere upon the face of the earth who carry the understanding and can verbally defend nature's God and nature's law. It is in the hands of those in this room and all with eyes and ears who can see and hear to protect liberty and to set this ship right and once again begin the long march toward freedom. I find myself in an extraordinarily strange position. I haven't done what I've wanted to do in quite some time. I find myself in a position of owning now a growing media company. And I have worked hard to make sure I owe no man a single dime. I am not beholden to any special interest groups. I'm not beholden to one of the parties. And I cannot tell you that I am not afraid to speak. But I will tell you this. I will speak, and I will speak only the truth as I understand it, come what may. A couple of months ago, I instructed my editors at The Blaze to report on stories that were focused on people who used a gun to save the day. Because we hear all the other stories over and over again. And about 3 months ago, I actually invited them to do that because it was right after Sandy Hook and the Sandy Hook shootings. And I wanted to find the stories of everyday people who saved someone with a gun. And with very rare exception, we have had a story like that current every single day, with few exceptions, for the last 100 days. In fact, I only told my editor at The Blaze, I didn't tell anyone else, and Pat, my partner on the radio, came to me one day, it was so funny, and he said, "Glenn, there's an epidemic. There's an epidemic going on of good stuff with guns." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Haven't you been reading The Blaze? Every day. Every day there's another story of somebody stopping a rape or stopping somebody from stealing something. Every day it's an epidemic of good." I said, "It's not really an epidemic of good. It's called honest journalism." Let me give you a couple of stories. On April 4th, just a month ago, in Portland, Oregon, a woman was attacked around 10 p.m. She had just gotten out of her car. A man approached her from behind, dragged her for a while by her ponytail. We all know what would have happened next, but this woman had a gun. She pointed it at the man, and he ran like a little girl. A week earlier, in Youngstown, Ohio, an elderly woman strapped to an oxygen tank at home. She saw the shadow of a man lurking outside her window. Then the front door rattled and the glass broke. The man was inside of her home. She immediately retrieved her revolver and called out. She said, "Leave me alone! Get out of here!" But the guy kept approaching, so she shot him. She shot him and held him at gunpoint while he was bleeding on the floor in her kitchen until the police arrived later. Then a few weeks before that, in Dickinson, Texas, home invasion. The attackers are sexually assaulting a mother and her daughter. Unspeakable horror. The woman's young son had been tied up. I cannot imagine. But this young man, while hearing his mother and his sister cry out, broke his restraints. He grabbed the family handgun. Upon seeing the gun, the two men fled from the home. He saved his mother and daughter with a gun. It happens every day. And it seems to me that we are the only major media outlet in the country with the guts to report it. Why? Because truth has no agenda, but politicians and the media does. Guns save lives. Guns protect homes, businesses. Guns protect our mothers, our wives, our daughters, our children. Unfortunately, the truth is that guns, on very rare occasions, are also used by madmen to kill our children. The truth is that there are on so many occasions the only difference between your mom and sister getting raped and them walking home unmolested is a gun. It happens all the time, and it can happen to you. The other side knows this. They know it. Yet they have counted on a compliant and willing partner in the mainstream media to overlook these stories. They are counting on you not being able to find these stories. But what they haven't counted on are broadcast entities like mine, or bloggers like Michelle Malkin, Dana Lash, Ben Shapiro, and many, many others. What they didn't see coming was people like you. The willingness to share those stories, to tweet, to Facebook, or to even email to your friends. They are counting on organizations like the NRA and people who have committed to stand and fight to fold out of fear. They are counting on you to remain quiet, for our soldiers to come home, to sit down and to be quiet, not to have the courage, like so many soldiers, to come home and tell the truth, like Marcus Luttrell or Chris Kyle. Or their sweet, dear wives, or their wives who pick up the torch and carry on. You see, the left does not know us. They really don't. Darkness does not understand the light. They didn't foresee the Colorado sheriffs that stood up to Obama's gun grabbing. The officers in Colorado that were told, it's in your best interest to be at the Denver Police Academy, to stand behind the president and his anti-gun measures. Because I believe they answer to a higher power, or maybe they just simply can recognize the truth still, they refuse to betray the idea of freedom of conscience and betray the idea of the Bill of Rights. Let me tell you something that the sheriffs in Colorado knew. It is never in our best interests to sit down, shut up, and be quiet. It is always right to stand, always right to speak, always right to defend the truth, no matter how high the price. Always right. We have always known that there is a difference between right and wrong. America, it is far past time for us to stand and begin to declare the difference between right and wrong again. Stand up, speak out. Never give up, never give in. Since when? Since when? In America, has it become fashionable or right to stand up against your own beliefs? Since when is that in your best interest? It never has been. Some of our friends who don't understand why we are currently making such a big deal. Oh, it's just your gun, it's just a little more regulation. They don't understand, they truly don't understand. They think this is really about guns, but it's not. It's not just about the Second Amendment. It's about all of them. It's not about the right to keep and bear arms. It's about all of your rights. It's about the right of conscience and the responsibility to secure those for future generations. Progressives really want to make the Second Amendment invisible, something we can overlook, but we, every day, should be working to make it clearer. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. If an individual goes out and commits an unspeakable act of horror with a gun, of course this is really disturbing as I say this while I'm putting on gloves. Pay no attention to the tarp on the floor. If a man goes out and does unspeakable horror, don't blame the gun. Don't blame my gun, his gun. Don't blame the NRA. It's not the gun that is committing the unspeakable acts. It's not the gun. It is the individual. A gun has power for good or evil, depending on whose hands that gun is in. It is merely a reflection of what is in those hands. I am very blessed. Jim Sapika is here. He is the other man in the gloves. I have been looking for guns that will tell a story and teach the story of the Second Amendment. And Jim is with the NRA Museum, and if you haven't been to the NRA Museum in Washington, D.C., you need to be. Some amazing, amazing guns, and I've had to cut about half of them from this speech tonight. I want to start with this. This is actually a gun from David Barton, and this is a gun that was used the first time we fought Muslim extremists. Most people don't even realize that's what the Barbary pirates were. The shores of Tripoli. Why were our Marines named Leathernecks? Leather, so you couldn't be beheaded by the Muslim extremists. Thomas Jefferson wrote his Quran. In his version of the Quran, printed by the US government, it has a warning. Pay attention to these people. They are not fooling around, and they will be the death of us. He didn't want to have a foreign war. But we were paying 75% of everything that we had over in bribes to the Barbary pirates. So he sent the Marines over. This gun was used against the Marines. Well, actually, let me start at the beginning. This is not a Barbary pirate gun, although it is decorated as one. This is actually a gun that was used in the American Revolution by the British against us. So it first fought in the hands of a British soldier. That soldier was killed. It was then picked up and used against the British by an American soldier. It was then passed to the next generation. So when Thomas Jefferson started the Marines, that American soldier took this gun and he died fighting on the shores of Tripoli. It was then picked up by a Muslim extremist. So what is this gun? Is it good or is it evil? It is nothing but a gun. A gun is only a reflection of the people that use it. It's not the man, it is the gun. People are different, but the gun always remains the same. And when we get past the politics, when we get past the media, when we get past all the bullcrap, and we start to actually have a conversation with somebody in any party or no party, of our faith, out of our faith, when we start to get to the honest conversation, people always begin to say things like this: what's happening to our country? What is going on? Things are getting crazy. I don't even know how to protect my children. I don't know how to protect my family anymore. I'm worried. I'm worried that our kids are not going to have the opportunities that I had when I was growing up. What kind of country are they even growing up in? Which brings us to why we fight. We have to have that conversation tonight. How do I protect myself and my children? How do I protect my loved ones? How do they even protect themselves? I believe that we fight because we actually are trying to fix things. We are trying to change things. We're all in this together, guys. We're all parents, or will be parents, all of us. And so we're all looking out for our children, and we're working hard. We're trying to keep our jobs. People have 2 jobs, are barely making it in this economy. They've got their boss breathing down their neck. Somebody's just cut them off in traffic. They can barely afford the food at the grocery store. They come home and their kids are telling them some stuff that they've learned in school, and they're like, what the heck does that even mean? What are you even talking about? They turn on television. Our society is sick. Our society is sick. We are fighting so hard just to keep our head above water. And here we are, a nation now that has become numb to the horrors of death, unless that death somehow or another has a political advantage for someone. It serves a political purpose. Then we care. Our ambassador is butchered in Benghazi. Our troops, for the first time that I know, if in at least my lifetime, our troops are instructed. They're there. They can help him. Stand down and leave the men behind. I've never heard that before. That fundamentally changes who we are. And the politicians lie, and the media fails to report. Our media doesn't even report that many times it is safer to walk down the streets in Afghanistan, in Baghdad, than it is to walk down the streets of Chicago. But they don't report it. Yet the media and the elites call the NRA and its members killers. We don't even discuss the fact that an abortion doctor in Philadelphia literally has a jar of baby feet on his desk. A jar of feet. And we look away from the slaughterhouse and dismiss it. We look away from the fact that 41% of all pregnancies in New York end in abortion. And then our president this week becomes a champion for the over-the-counter abortion pill for 15-year-olds. God, may you forgive us. We are a sick society. Our society is sick, and while we, each of us, are struggling to try to figure these things out and then figure out how we can impact them, we then, while we're doing all the stuff we do and trying to figure out how we can help hold society together, we then have to turn around and beat back the power grabbers in Washington and their lies from the media. We know that the only thing that can stop someone from brutal rape or murder is another responsible individual with a gun. That's the solution. If you're truly interested in looking for solutions, that's one. Because gun-free zones mean nothing. Gun-free zones, all they do is prevent the good guys from going in and actually having guns. The bad guys will have them. In the People's Republic of Cambridge, that wasn't meant to be a laugh line. That's what it is, I think. The People's Republic of Cambridge. They actually have a nuclear-free zone. Did you know that? I'm sure Kim Jong-il or Kim Ung-jung or whatever the hell his name is, I'm sure he's like, oh, damn. Nuclear-free zone, Cambridge. By the way, I'm going to make you feel even better. It's also a hate-free zone. So what could possibly happen? What could possibly... besides the fact that 2 of their citizens plotted mass murder right there in nuclear-free Kumbaya, Cambridge. And what did they use? I'm not kidding you. What was my grandmother's summer pastime has now been defined as a weapon of mass destruction. Not kidding you. That's a weapon of mass destruction now. Have we gone insane? Have we gone insane? Yes, we have. Yes, we have. When I asked my staff, I said, I need a pressure cooker. They all looked at each other and went, I'm not going in to ask for one. John, one of my assistants, he's like, come on, man, don't send me. At least send a girl. And I'm like, you sexist. After the Sandy Hook massacre, the government went in and seized the opportunity, exploited the families. It was shameful, pushed for more gun control. It's immoral. Meanwhile, they left all of our communities with this nice little warm and fuzzy thing called gun-free zones. Gun-free zones, that is fantastic. If I may translate to any criminal that might be within earshot, that means a zero opposition zone. The American people have the facts on their side, but the American people don't know the facts. We have the Constitution on our side, but the American people don't know the Constitution. We have the truth on our side, but how many of us can even recognize the truth anymore? The only way you can control people, the only way, is not to take away their guns, but to first lie to them. Lie to them relentlessly, over and over, until they become numb. And the bigger the lie, and the longer you deny reality, the more apt people are just to fall in line with the lie. But there is always someone. There is always someone who will stand up. There is always someone that will stand up and say the truth. Why do you think they're doing to Wayne LaPierre what they're doing? I don't even know if you know. Sorry, Wayne, if you haven't said it. I didn't say anything about that. Members of the NRA, their whole lives are being turned upside down. If you think Wayne LaPierre is going to come out of this with his reputation, you're wrong. They will destroy, they will smear, they will isolate, they will mock, until the truth is not only relevant anymore, nobody even wants to talk about it anymore. Yeah, whatever, 2 + 2 = 5. I know, 2 + 2 = 5. And they'll go on with their life. We must not let that happen to us. We must stand when they call us rednecks, right-wingers. I love this one. Anti-government. Or here's the latest smear. We actually live in a country now where this is a smear. When they try to smear you with the C word, Christian. Wear it as a badge of honor. It's the only thing that will save us now. Americans will believe these lies. They will. They'll believe these lies, especially those who never grew up around guns. And there's a lot of people like that. They are legitimately confused. Do not be angry at them. They're legitimately confused. They don't know what the NRA is, the right to keep and bear arms. They didn't grow up like many of us did. These are the people that we have to reach out to. These are the people that we can change their minds and their hearts because they really truly believe that the gun is evil. They really truly believe that we are responsible for killing children at Sandy Hook or Aurora or Columbine and all the rest. They have accepted the media line that the NRA is malicious. In a way, I don't blame them. In a way, I don't blame them. When your kids are being carted out by the police, out of their classroom because their teacher called the police because they drew a picture of a paper gun, I mean, it doesn't take an awful lot of indoctrination, but boy, their kids are getting an awful lot. But it does take an awful lot of work to get around all of the lies and the government control and the media in collusion. But there's another reason why people believe these lies, and it's really quite simple. It's really easy to understand and empathize with them. In a society that is this sick, when you are truly on absolute overload as a parent, if somebody gives you an easy answer, and one that you think, okay, I don't really know about guns. I don't relate to the NRA. I don't relate to these people who go hunting. What is the big deal with guns? They don't really understand the Constitution. And they're on overload. And they're trying to fix everything as much as they possibly can. And somebody comes to you and says, it's them. It's very easy to snap at that. It's easy. And it's seductive because it also does not require you to examine your own life or your role as a citizen or a parent. It doesn't require you to make any changes except, yeah, I'm for that. What's wrong with these people? This is easier and easier to do because right now only 35% of Americans even own a gun. And that number is rapidly decreasing. Let's be clear. We have to talk about facts. We have to talk about facts. We have to talk about history. I'm going to give you some facts, and I beg of you, do not take my word for it. Do not take my word for it. You look all of these things up yourself. You do your own homework. We have to start with making something really clear, and that is this. Guns have lifted people out of poverty and have allowed the oppressed to rise up and stand against tyranny over and over and over again. But people will say, oh my gosh, how could you possibly defend the use of guns? How could you do that? How irresponsible of you. The gun, you know, is the most dangerous weapon, the most dangerous item on the planet. You know, no other country in the entire world has the problem that America has with gun massacres. You know what we should do? We should be more like England, where their police just use batons. The only way to save our children is to reenact the gun ban, the assault weapons ban, and control the people's right to own a gun. Even our president has said, if there is just one thing that we could do that would save just one child, don't we have an obligation to try? Oh my gosh. Well, yes. Yes, we do. So let me start there. Mr. President, let me use your logic and explain exactly why that logic doesn't work. Mr. President, you have authorized the killings of 176 innocent children in Pakistan. These children didn't do anything. I'd have to say these children were just as innocent as the ones who died in Sandy Hook. Adam Lanza, sir, killed 26, 20 of them children. Your drones killed 176 innocent, lovable children that did nothing. I'd say, sir, if we used your logic, not mine, but your logic, because both were innocent. Well, Mr. President, if we used your logic to save innocent children, then I'd say we'd have to start with you, and we'd have to take the button for the drone out of your hand. It's not about drones. That's a ridiculous piece of rhetoric. That's ridiculous. It's not about drones. It's not about guns. It's not about the war. And let me clarify for any members of the media, let me just clarify here. I did not just accuse the president of killing innocent children, even though that is exactly what this president has accused Wayne LaPierre and every member of the NRA of doing. We will not use the tools of Saul Alinsky. We will not use the tools of Saul Alinsky. We have read Rules for Radicals, which starts with, quote, a tip of the hat to the first real radical, Lucifer, end quote. We will not tip our hat to Satan, Mr. President, but we will bend our knees to God and honestly seek the truth. To win, we have to remain rational and calm. We have to hold on to logic, because in the heat of battle, people lose logic because of fear. We make irrational decisions because you just want it to stop. If you look at the countries that have banned guns, it's always because of an emergency. So let's fix reason and logic firmly in her seat and question with boldness and accept the answers, the truth, the scientific facts, whether they hurt us or help us. Let's look at the countries who have rapidly undergone efforts to ban guns. In every single place, media, are you taking note? In every single place that all guns or handguns are banned, the murder rate goes up. Compare that to all other developed nations. The highest murder rate in America. No, it's not in America. But the highest murder rate is in the countries with the strictest gun control laws. We should ban guns like they did in England, should we? Gun-related crimes doubled in England within a decade of guns being banned, and 4 years after they were banned, the English Bobby began carrying guns for the very first time. Why? Because gun bans double death rates. Mass killings, they're an epidemic in America. Actually, they're extraordinarily rare. 513 people have been killed in mass killings since 1983. That's an awful lot, too many, I know. But 3,696 people have been killed by lightning in the same time period. There are 30,000 firearms-related deaths per year, they say. What they won't tell you is that 65% of those, including the one that happened 2 days ago here in Houston, are suicides. Most of the remaining 35% are for self-protection, or they are our police officers in the line of duty. If you factor in the suicide, the cops, the protection, the murder rate is extraordinarily low. The murder rates are less than half of what they were here in America during the Great Depression. Whoa, now wait a minute here, that seems to imply something. That seems to imply when people are out of work, the more murders occur. I bet the same would be true if somebody had the courage to look this up for suicides. The Blaze verified that the man that shot himself at the airport had just been fired and lost his job. Gee, maybe, Mr. President, we wouldn't need to ban guns. In fact, Mr. President, if you'd like to save lives, maybe what we should do is fix the economy and create jobs. If you want to reduce gun violence, you don't close the gun stores or increase the regulation or buy up all the bullets. You remove the tax burdens. You clear the bureaucratic mess for small businesses so they can create jobs and people can build a brighter future. Facts matter. This one I love. They say that we have one of the highest murder rates in the world, but if you take out the gun death rates in cities like Chicago, Detroit, the District of Columbia, and New Orleans, all progressive cities, where the gun laws are the strictest, America would have one of the lowest murder rates in the world. In fact, when you take out the progressive cities, America goes from the country with the third highest rate to one in the bottom 10. When somebody argues for gun control, they are either living in self-imposed ignorance or they are just living an argument of control. For us, tonight and every day forward from here, we must dedicate our lives to educate ourselves, our children, our families, and dedicate our lives to man's liberty. But it must become about the responsibility that we keep as citizens, to make sure that we give no more power to those in government at any level. We also must understand that many of our fellow citizens no longer want to accept any kind of responsibility at all. Thus, the explanation for Michael Bloomberg in New York City. I am amazed at how many of my New York friends have become absolute dopes and just will accept the soda ban, the popcorn ban, the salt ban. They'll just accept it. By the way, just a quick note, I want to throw in an advertisement here. I've come up with a new advertisement for New York. We all know I heart New York. I'd like to show you my new advertisement for it, new slogan. There it is. You will love New York. Progressives like Michael Bloomberg know better than you. He claims that he doesn't have to live under the same rules exactly. For instance, he has said that global warming, by the way, what a beautiful day in Houston, Texas. Surprisingly chilly. Global warming, he said, because of that, we need a law. You can't let your car idle in New York City. But the mayor, he don't like it. It was hot. He didn't like to get into hot cars. So he let his car idle. When one member of the press decided to point it out, all he said was, "You got me." What's fair is fair. So instead of letting the car idle, he got an air conditioner. The kind of air conditioner that most people in New York have hanging out of the window of their apartments. And he built a special contraption and put it in his car. He wants to control every aspect of your life. He put that contraption on the side of the car, and then he took the extension cord and ran it into his New York skyscraper, and there it was, a home apartment air conditioner. What? What's the problem? I'm just like you, one of the people. I don't think so. He wants to control everything about your life. He wants to control what you drink, what you eat, how much you eat, how you eat. They even talked to him in an interview recently, about a week ago, and he actually said these words: well, I don't think you could actually force everyone to exercise, but... I'm sorry, you don't think you could force everyone in New York City to exercise? Calling U-Haul, get me out of New York. Progressives are different. They are the ranchers, and you are the cattle. There are members in Congress who are absolutely pro-gun control. They don't think it's right that you should be able to have a gun. But some senators, who shall remain unnamed for the time being, maybe in the New York area, carry a gun. What's up with that? What's up with that? Well, they're different. They have death threats. Oh, okay. Michael Moore, anti-gun as it gets. His security guards have been arrested twice in airports. I don't think just for guns, but I think illegal guns. But he's different. He needs a gun. You shouldn't have a gun, but he needs a gun. Even the first progressive president, and please don't try to convince anyone that it's the longest stage in the world. Don't try to convince anyone. Please don't tell me I left those. Okay, here, there. Don't try to tell me that the progressive disease is just from a Republican or just the Democrats. I'm sorry, I was thinking of John McCain there for a second. The Progressive Party was started, bully, by Theodore Roosevelt. It was started by a Republican. The president has the ultimate security system. He has the Secret Service. He has them at the front door. He has them at the entryway, by his bedroom. It's great. But should somebody actually get past the Secret Service? Bully! Theodore Roosevelt wanted to make sure that he had his gun in the nightstand right next to his bed so he could shoot the guy himself. Not you, sir. Well, maybe it was you. This is the first progressive president's gun that was kept in the White House. The president really doesn't even need a gun, right? I mean, well, this president does. Man, this president, he's fantastic. I mean, just to, shoot some trap or skeet, he is great. Why would the president even need a gun? Well, of course, people want to hurt him, but that's what the Secret Service is for. He doesn't need a wallet. He doesn't need a driver's license. He doesn't drive. The Secret Service takes care of all that stuff for him. Why would any president need a gun? Because they wanted one. Because in the end, it was their responsibility and their right to protect themselves. Hollywood stars have all these protective details. It's a joke. But not everybody can afford a protective detail, Jim Carrey. But in America, everyone should be afforded the right to survive. I don't know about you, but I don't trust anybody else with my family's security. I unfortunately live in a world where I do have to have 24-hour security for myself and my family. But even with all of that, in the end, it's me. In the end, I still have a gun by my nightstand as well. How could anyone lend their life to someone else? How could you possibly feel comfortable, especially with this government? The government is trying to convince everybody, we're best to take care of you, don't worry, we've got it handled. Really? Didn't you guys just fail to notice 3 out of the 4 bombers in the Boston bombing, they overstayed their visa? 3 out of the 4, and 1 had been deported in January. 3 weeks later, another arm of DHS went, "Oh, really? Come on in." Really? You guys are protecting us? This is more than incompetence, it's criminal. It is criminal. The Second Amendment was written for The Second Amendment was written to protect our natural rights. And we have also the responsibility to throw off the chains of tyranny. Oh, there he goes, talking about throwing off the chains of tyranny. That sounds like Revolution 1, anti-government Christian, I knew it. But it also is so old-fashioned. Tyranny, I know. That's the real one. Oh, it's so old-fashioned, you know. The founders, they had flintlocks, please. That's what they had. How could they possibly see the AR-15 happen? They had a flintlock. Really? They couldn't see the AR-15. Well, you know what? They probably couldn't see the AR-15 specifically. But why is that the important part of the founders? Why they wrote the words and how they wrote the words, that to me seems like a more important part of whether or not they could see the assault weapon. Because they wrote it in such a way that if you don't like the Constitution, you don't go around the Constitution, you go through the Constitution to change it. The founders made that possible. It's simple. It's not easy, but it is simple to do. It's called an amendment. The founders weren't anti-progress, they were anti-control. They not only expected change, they embraced change. They were change. The rule of law and the Constitution is the way for change to happen, not in the cover of darkness with an executive order. Let me tell you something. The founders may not have seen the AR-15, but believe me, President Obama, Michael Bloomberg, Joe Manchin, and even our beloved Pat Toomey, they may not have seen the AR-15, but believe me, gentlemen, they sure the hell saw you coming. The founders also warned about a time when the government would take the guns. They called that a monopoly of violence because they knew that happens to governments, and governments turn against their people because the people go to sleep. And if a government had a monopoly of violence, tyranny then would go undefeated. No one would be able to stop it. And if you think, oh, gee, there he goes again with these crazy ideas, ask the Japanese Americans about the internment camps of World War II, done by the beloved progressive president FDR through executive order. If you don't believe that the government can do terrible things to its citizens, please explain to me the Lakota Indians. The Lakota Indians that were asleep by the river when the troops arrived in the freezing cold on a December morning. This just went up. This billboard, turn in your arms, the government will take care of you. Gee, what's that about? This is politically incorrect, they've shouted all week. This is wrong, how dare you exploit the Indians? Oh, please, lefties don't start with that. For everyone's protection, there by the river, the troops began early in the morning, in a December morning, to enter the Indians' tents. They were sleeping, but for their protection, they had to take those guns. There was one boy in one tent who was deaf. He tried to hold on to his gun. He tried to explain that he had paid a lot of money for that gun. And in the struggle to hang on to it, the gun discharged. And the U.S. soldiers stepped back and unloaded on a group of women and children and men, 300 in total. 150 of them were killed that December morning. Another 51 were wounded. People were trying to run across the creek completely unarmed. They were caught and killed by the soldiers without anything to defend themselves with. The creek, Wounded Knee, the year 1890. Now, the reason why I came across Wounded Knee here recently is because I was looking at the number of medals of honor that the president was giving out. And I thought, boy, he seems to like have those in a Pez dispenser right now. But actually, he is giving them out at about the same rate as others. But nothing like Wounded Knee. 20 medals of honor were awarded to American soldiers for that massacre. 20. I want to give you a little perspective. Why that jumps off the page is because for D-Day, 4 Medal of Honors were given out. Battle of the Bulge, 17. Pearl Harbor, 15. The Indian slaughter, 20? Yes. The government and the media covered it up, and they used an award to spin the tale. This gun, you want to... I don't know where I left my... Thank you. This gun here actually came from that tribe. This gun was taken at Wounded Knee. This gun should stand as a reminder of what a government can do to an innocent group of people for their safety, of course. Now, for those members on the left that would like to excuse the internment camps or excuse the slaughter of Native Americans, well, why don't we go to what the American government did to the African American? Shall we go there? Let me ask you, what do you suppose the African American in 1850 could have done with a gun? Even after they were freed in 1880, gee, a little less gun control would have been good, wouldn't it? I'm sorry, members of the left, I'm sorry, what are you saying? You're defending the gun control? After the Emancipation Proclamation, slavery was over, but not really. Not really. It's why Martin Luther King eventually marched. It didn't end after the Emancipation Proclamation. Why? Because, and do not take my word for it, look this up yourself, because of the pro-slavery Democrats in the South. They tried to disarm the blacks because the last thing they could do is have those people witness true freedom, even after they were declared free. And they were reading and educating themselves, trying to lift themselves out of poverty, up from slavery, as Booker T. Washington would say. The very last thing, the very last attempt to keep them in check was gun control. The sheriff would come and take away the guns at night, and lo and behold, wouldn't you know it, within a couple of days, here would come the Klan. If they weren't allowed to protect themselves, what good would all the knowledge be? It would all be useless in the face of a gun or a midnight raid or a torch or a sword. Americans of all colors, of all creeds, have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But the Democrats at the time were not happy about this at all. They had the power in the South, and they weren't going to change. War or no war, they wouldn't change. The Democrats then decided they could put together a terrorist organization. Oh, they had a good terrorist organization. It was called the Klan. And let's clean up some mess on the Klan tonight, shall we? The Klan did not only kill blacks. They also killed any white who supported the integration into the Union as a full citizen of any black man or any woman or black man that wanted to be a citizen. If you were white and you supported, you were an enemy of the Klan as well. The Klan would kill anybody, but they loved to kill blacks. But what they really loved to kill was what they called the radical Republicans. Boy, history's getting all tangled up inside of a knot right now, isn't it? Those were the Republicans who supported racial integration or equality for all. Our history is so screwed up that we allow people to say that all whites are racists. A full 25% of the people who were lynched were white. That's the biggest lie of all, that all whites are racist. Both Republicans and blacks ended up on the kill list. And so the Klan went around lynching families, killing them, killing whites out of hatred. 25% of all lynchings, white people who had just committed to stand and fight because it was right. A lot of times people couldn't do anything about it because they didn't have a gun, because their right had been taken away by the government. Now, if you have a gun and the Klan comes knocking at your door, how is that freedom exactly? If you don't have a gun, how could you protect yourself? Well, I have the right to have a gun, but I can't keep it, or I can't have it on me. And the left will ask, well, gee, why do you need more than a couple of bullets? I mean, what are you going to hunt with more than 6 bullets in your gun? Well, I don't know. If the Klan or the Crips or any of the gangs that are now coming across our border unimpeded, if they happen to come knocking at my door, I might need more than 6 bullets, thank you. The really tragic thing is our American history is so screwed up that the people who really need to hear this history, the people who could use it the most, the Americans that need it will not see, they will not hear it. They are the Americans that are currently trapped in the violence, the death, and the despair of our inner cities that have been run by progressive governments since the 1950s and 60s. Those collective utopias of failing schools that were designed not to teach about personal responsibility and freedoms and rights and the power of the gun. Teach them their own American history, and they will join us in understanding that universal access to firearms is indistinguishable from emancipation. Do your own homework on all of this. Do your own homework. It's not about safety, it's about control. At a time in our country's history when any 12-year-old could walk into a gun store and buy a gun, at a time in the 1950s where over 60% of Americans had a gun in their home, some Americans still struggled to feel the true impact of God-given rights. In Alabama in 1956, you needed a permit to carry a gun. A black preacher who knew his rights, more importantly, knew his people's history. He took his job as the father, the patriarch of his family. He took his job, his duty as the protector of his family seriously. And as things began to heat up in his world, he did the right thing. A citizen of good standing, he went down to the police station and he filled an application out so he could have a concealed carry permit, so he could legally carry a gun. But because he was considered a challenge to the people who were at that time in control of the system, the Alabama police told Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, "Oh, Reverend, I'm sorry. We'd sure like to give you a permit to carry a gun, but for your own safety, sir, for your own safety, we just don't think you should have that permit." Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King owned several firearms. How many people even know that fact? He owned several firearms, and he was denied the right to carry a gun for his own safety. I'm sorry, let me hear from the left some more about gun control. Is there anyone within the sound of my voice believes that that man was denied a concealed carry because it was in his best interest? If you are truly concerned and serious about getting guns out of the hands of people who have proven themselves to be unworthy or dangerous with guns or irresponsible, then we need to tell the truth. Racists like James Earl Ray killed 1. Disturbed killers like Adam Lanza killed 26. But histories show governments kill millions. Let me come back to the hippie picture that we started with. Let me start with the hippie picture. Do we have the hippie picture? Nothing better than a naked hippie. The same year that half of this nation chose to reach for the stars and go to the moon and show what people could do, it's the same year others were rolling in the mud at Woodstock and getting as low as they could. Naked hippies. Reason why I want to tell you this story about a naked hippie, and I want to just, so members of the press don't get confused, this isn't a picture of the actual naked hippie. Somebody on my staff said, Glenn, we couldn't find a picture of that actual naked hippie. I said, just get any naked hippie. So they did. And somebody said to me, you better point out, because this is a quote, some member of the press, they'll know their naked hippie pictures. And what's sad, all of us in the room went, yep. It was early morning in California when a resident, very possible an NRA member, had to be a hunter, called the police and said, I'm in California, I'm regretting every second of it now. I've got some naked hippie in the back, and he's naked, and he's a hippie, and he's shooting at the birds. And so the police came up and said, naked hippie, dude, what are you doing? He's like, killing the birds, man. Yeah. Feel the breeze. Said, put your gun down, naked hippie, and put some pants on, man. Have some self-respect. So he put his gun down. This is the gun the naked hippie was shooting. The naked hippie was Charlie Manson. But see, that didn't stop Charlie Manson. Charlie Manson had his gun taken away. Charlie Manson, he didn't kill with a gun. He used a knife. Isn't that confusing? Guns don't kill people. People kill people. Here he was returning to Helter Skelter, one of the most brutal mass murderers on record. He and his followers used knives. It is the intent of the individual, not the weapon. We have to admit two things if we're going to actually fight and win. We have to admit two things. Weapons will always find their way into the hands of bad people. Always. No matter how many bans there are. But we must declare this, that guns must remain in the hands of good people. This is the beginning of our path to a solution. Good people who will stand and fight. I want to share another gun, one more gun with you. It is this gun. I want you to look at the torque on this gun. Look at how it is bent. This gun comes from September 11th, 2001. A moment in history that changed each of us and changed our country forever. It unfortunately defines our generation. While victims were running away, men were running in. One of those men was Walter Weaver. He was a police officer and a lifetime NRA member. He was last seen running into the World Trade Center trying to rescue people. He was in the lobby trying to free people from an elevator. A servant in his last moments of life, fighting for individual freedom until the very end. After the towers fell and the rubble began to be cleared, and people were mourned, they sifted through the rubble. This was the only reminder left. This was it. A silent token of liberty and freedom. I know enough heroes to know that they do not like to be called heroes. Do they, Mrs. Kyle, Mrs. Luttrell? They see themselves as simply an American. He was an example of what all of us should be. Men who just do the right thing when trouble calls out. When there is an emergency or trouble, we should be the ones who run in and run to help, not for help. We must be the action on the other side of 9/11 if we are of 911 if we are the ones that are going to fix this problem. I believe Walter Weaver, and I don't know this, but I'm guessing he would tell you that the police academy did not train him to be a hero. He was just raised in a country, in a faith that taught him about self-sacrifice, to always do the right thing even if no one is watching. He knew those things long before he put on that uniform the first time. We know this to be true. We know there are good cops and bad cops. But no one argues to take away the badges of all cops. We say, find the bad cops, strengthen the good cops. It's the people, not the badge. The good policemen in our country, and they are good policemen. But still, when you are in trouble, the average time for them to respond is 8 minutes. Most crimes take less than 1. If a responsible member of the NRA, if a responsible citizen had a gun in that movie theater in Colorado, which they could have in any other movie theater around, that one had banned guns. If members in that audience, in that theater, were allowed to bring their gun and not leave it locked in their glove box, how many lives would have been saved? How many of the mourning children would have instead had breakfast over the breakfast table and talked to their parent this morning? While our politicians from the local and federal level spend us into oblivion, and our police services are being obliterated and services are being cut, they talk about taking our guns. We must no longer accept the falsehood nor reinforce it by calling our good, decent, brave men and women who wear blue on our city streets. We must not call them first responders anymore. It's time for America to remember what the Carter administration began to teach was not true. It was the Carter administration that started to teach us that they were the first responders. Up until that time, we knew we were the first responders. They were our backup. When there is trouble, Let us be the first on the scene to help. Let us be the first responder when someone is sick or hungry or frightened. Let us be the first to share our bread with the hungry. Let us be the first to open our hearts to the homeless and the poor. Let us be the first to remove the yoke of injustice. Let us be the first to tell the truth again. I don't know what you will choose. I don't know what America will choose. But for me and my family, I choose to stand with courage. I choose to stand with selflessness. I choose to stand with God. As Lincoln said, with malice toward none and charity toward all, because that's who we really are. Forget what the media says. Forget the names the media calls you. That's who you really are. Our freedom is under attack. Our liberty, our way of life is being legislated out of existence. Our rights are being diminished by a ruling class of power of elites. They're growing out of control. We are in a precarious situation. We are. The hour grows late. We have a government that is now run by radical revolutionaries actively working against the Constitution and the American people. There are politicians in the government, both Democrat and Republican, who still, if they're not involved, still don't even understand what they're dealing with. They are dealing with a different kind of enemy, and they are playing for the stakes of the world. They're not tinkering around the edges anymore. They are going after the very core of America, because they know if you lose the Second Amendment, you certainly lose the First and the Fourth and the Fifth, the right to a grand jury, and the 10th and the 14th and the 19th, and all in the end you'll be left with is the income tax. Maybe if you're lucky, they also still won't quarter any soldiers in your house. I'm not sure. Charlton Heston stood. He stood in 1976, and he said, "Out of my cold, dead hands." He drew the line in the sand. He said, "I will not give up my weapon. I will not comply. I will stand and fight." But we have to define what a fight means. And it must allow us to remain true to who we are. Tonight, let a new chapter of the fight for liberty begin. And let it not be defined by that one line, "out of our cold, dead hands." But instead, let it be defined by the hearts of good people, the active minds of a free people, the actions of a righteous people, because it's about who we are. We're Americans, and it's time to be proud to be American again and carry a cause that is greater than ourselves again. It is time now to no longer run from labels or fear them. Instead, embrace those things that will only be the life preserver and the only life preserver of any value. Let us declare without shame, yes, yes, Mr. President, I will cling to my God and my guns, because He is my rock and they are central to our foundation. In the coming days, I will announce an effort. In the coming days, I am going to announce an effort with major partners who know the time of the day, and I hope you in the NRA will join me. We must begin to teach the American people about civil rights and how to stand with civil rights with the same vigor and discipline that was taught to my good friend Alveda King by her uncle Martin. We must learn what it means to passively resist. Let us resist with the Judeo-Christian tradition. It's what the Underground Railroad and the lunch counters and Tiananmen Square was all about. Most God-fearing, hard-working Americans have always associated things like peace activists or sit-ins or resistance with pot-smoking naked hippies. But by doing so, we have dismissed their power and their true roots. Because the media has taken the 1960s and made the cultural icon of that decade the naked hippie, we miss the truth of what truly moved us forward as a people. It wasn't free love. Free love has nothing to do with freedom or love that had been made just into sex. The true and powerful meaning of the 1960s was that God demands equal justice and equal rights for all of his children. That was the center of the Martin Luther King movement. That and that alone, and that is the torch we must pick up again. We must not respond in kind by getting angry or playing dirty or by calling people names or striking out, because that's not who we are. We know who they are, and we choose not to be like them. Let's not give that satisfaction to them or the media that, quite frankly, has already written that story. We're better than that. We are the law-abiding, God-fearing members of the NRA. We are Americans, and we will be clear. We will stand. We'll march if we have to. We'll stand because we must, but we will not be moved. Our right to keep and bear arms will not be infringed. We will follow the footsteps of Jesus Christ. We will follow the footsteps of Frederick Douglass, Winston Churchill, Thomas Paine, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Ben-Gurion, Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan, Gandhi, Thomas Jefferson, and Martin Luther King. Hear me now. Hear me now. We shall overcome. Let us not talk anymore about our cold, dead hands, but rather act. Rather be the people who have a cause to use our hands. It is not the gun or the knife, or as Cain discovered with Abel, the rock, but the heart that is filled with error, darkness, and coldness. That's what the problem is. So we will use our hands and we will use our hearts to lift up, to learn, to teach, to help, to heal, to protect. We will work side by side with white, black, Hispanic, Native American, off-planeters, whatever, because we don't see those divisions. We will work together as Americans, not only to preserve our rights, but the rights of our children to be safe, our wives and our daughters to not be held at gunpoint, to not be raped, and our most precious valuables of all, our children. We will stand so our children have the right to survive a simple walk down a city street, or, God forbid, a day of public education. It is not our cold, dead hands that will win this. But as always, when it comes to American victories, it will be our strong backs, our strong will, the ability to adapt and learn. It will be our warm hearts filled with love and charity for all men that will compel us to defend all men's right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Churchill said, "We shall not falter, we shall not fail." I'll tell you that if America fails or falters, the entire world will fall into darkness. So I will add, we cannot falter, we cannot fail. We will not be the generation that historians look back to and say, "What happened to these people?" We will not be the generation that loses mankind's freedom. Instead, let us declare to one another that we instead will be the generation that historians look back to with awe and wonder and say, how did they do it? They look back for inspiration, that even in our darkest times, with the greatest reason for doubt and fear, we rose above it. We pushed the darkness back. We held the torch of liberty. We held it high for all men to see and aspire to. I will not move, because I know the ultimate truth, because I am on the side of nature's God and nature's laws. Jesus was a man of love. He was a man of peace. He was a man of forgiveness. But make no mistake, Jesus Christ was also immovable. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And we will win by strapping on the full armor of God. We shall stand firm with the belt of truth, with the breastplate of righteousness, with the shield of faith, with the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit. We will fight their tactics of fear. We will fight their tactics of darkness. We will fight their lies, and we will counter them with love, peace, and equal justice for all mankind. Thank you.